So this thing happened. Matt did a video about return types in TypeScript. I made a comment about it to Primagen. So Primagen made like a huge thread reacting to it. Then Theo had to react on it, and now it seems like everyone is everyone is reacting it. Everyone is I think Matt doesn't get like enough credit in this whole story, but so yeah, he kind of like come up with this topic, but now everyone in in Twitter is talking about it. And this video just I just watched it. It was like 1 hour ago, and we're going to talk to the dev, right? The dev himself. We're going to uh, kind of react to the drama and kind of react to his video. So, Dev, if you can introduce yourself a bit.
Yeah, I would love to. Hope my audio is working fine. My name is Dev, or in my native language, it's called Dev, but I don't care about at this point. Everyone calls me Dev anyways. Um, yeah, I'm a software developer for the last 5, 6 years. Recently started making YouTube videos. Um, and yeah, this, I mean, you already talked about all the situation.
How
Matt made the video
much do
on
you
types.
like TypeScript?
How much do I like TypeScript?
Yeah.
Quite a bit, because I've been contemplating like moving to a different language like C# and .NET or Rust or Go for a while now. And like the fact that I'm still using TypeScript means like it's like just for me, it's like I really like TypeScript. I like the ecosystem. I like the language, and I want more things to happen to this language so that I can keep using TypeScript and I don't have to move to another language.
So,
So
did you
yeah,
had
definitely.
any experience with like other languages before JavaScript or TypeScript?
Yeah, so before TypeScript, I used like I did quite a bit of PHP in my high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then here, like throughout college, it's been like a little bit of C++, a little bit of C#, a little bit of Java, and like basically everything sprinkled around as colleges go. So I have like a little bit of experience doing a bunch of different things, from PHP to Java to C#, and a little bit of C++ as well initially, but not too much. Like again, high school level.
Uh-huh.
So that's my level. Like my level of experience in other languages is school projects.
Right. I wonder if they still like teach kind of like, I don't know, object-oriented UML diagrams and
They do.
all of that, kind of like TDD
They do,
maybe.
and I hate them for it.
So they do, but you hate.
Yeah, personally, like I'm just not a big fan of the state of education in tech programming software in general, especially when it comes to like college education, because it's just like I'm a fifth year, I'm a senior in college, and I don't think I've learned much in terms of technical skills from my 5 years in college.
Yeah, I got my degree in physics, and I just want to know that. Oh, I just want to say that people who get the most from education are people who kind of like don't rely on what they are going to be taught. They just teach themselves. So, and it's like it doesn't matter if it's like physics or programming or whatnot. It's just unfortunate truth. So, I just wanted to, yeah, I appreciate the like, please, relax. It doesn't like matter that much. And I think like the funny thing about this is that Matt's video is actually like pretty middle of the road. It's like, yeah, you can do this, you can do that. This is where I would use this one or that one. And it's funny that like Theo took the high road of like, no, never use that, and like Prime is like, no, like always use that, which is a bit like off the message, right? Of the original message. And I think your video is like good because you're like, yeah, you should use kind of like both of them, right?
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I was. Yeah, my personal. I don't know how much of it is like it's just me or other people are in the same boat or not, but I try to look at everything as like a trade-off. Like there has to be something good that comes out of it and something good that we have to sacrifice for it.
Hmm.
And in most of my videos, or even like outside of video, when I'm talking to people, when I'm trying to teach someone, when I'm trying to mentor my team, it always like it's in terms of what, like these are the different options, these are the different trade-offs, this is what you should, and like what should you do in specific situations. I'm i'm very rarely of the like it's very rare that I take take one side and I stick to it, like you should do this almost always. Like I almost always try to look at the trade-offs, and that's why I think it was very similar to Matt's video.
Yeah, and I think that's right. That's the message that's not going to get you like millions of views, but that's something that you need to be like practical about and stuff. So I think the first point that you touch here is the kind of like coupling, decoupling, and I sent you like on Twitter like a message. Hey, you haven't actually like decoupled those two things together. I guess apart, all right? Decoupled apart. I don't. I don't know what's the right one, but it's like you didn't decouple them. You just coupled both of them to like the third thing, and um, I know what you meant, and it's I kind of like overall agree with your message, but just the term of like decoupling and for me, I like I don't remember who kind of like came up with this word, but you had this in a video of a contract, right? Of like, hey, this is the like object, or this is the whatever the like the API or the protocol or contract or whatnot. It's like this is the boundary where we split our kind of like functions or application apart, and we are going to declare some kind of like language that we're going to speak, right? Or like protocol that we're going to speak between those parts. And if both parts are complying with this contract, we assume that everything kind of like goes correctly. Then again, you can always kind of like come up with a counterexample of where it falls off, even though you created this API. Uh, you created like a user that has a first name and last name. First name and last name could be like switched, right? And even though the contract will still be true, now like the implementation is wrong, and now like the whole system doesn't work, right? But you you know which part went wrong. You know that like get user details went wrong, and this is where it kind of like um, broke it contract, right? So I appreciate the message. I have like a bit of criticism of like calling it decoupling. I think it's coupling with the third thing, and it's coupling with some kind of like agreement. It's coupling it with some kind of like protocol, with some kind of like API, and so on. And it was an original like Matt's message of like, hey, if you're using like library level code of something that is going to be reused, you need to like name this thing, and this thing has to have some kind of constraints. It has to have some kind of like contract, right, in your terms. Am I kind of like fairly representing your view on this?
Yeah, pretty much, I'd say.
Okay. So um, and here is where I want to show kind of like like my real app, that the one that we're working on at Fogbender is like, I don't know, for example, like here, right? I have tags, or I have like room members. I want to have this thing named. I want to have this thing named because it could be like it could be like used in multiple places, right? It could be just a like a example that I made in my like a joke video. Where was it? Like something like that. Yeah, the Prime basically said, yeah, if you're here and you don't have like a column like something, how do you even know what is going to be returned here? And my question is, yeah, just like hover over your mouse. But like this thing that it returns, it doesn't make any sense, right? Like I can see that something is happening, but it's like four more, right? So this API, in a sense, a bit kind of like um, how do I want to phrase it? Do you have like a comment for it while I figure in my words?
Like it's just a big and ugly object. That's the best way to put it, I think.
Right. And the way that I would put it is that this thing, it doesn't have a really better name that than, oh yeah, I also have like this it's like basically like a gist on GitHub of like um, how to type providers for uh, for React, and the like the thing that I'm using there is that like this provider value, it returns like tons of the stuff. It's like it's a memo of like, I don't know, like 20 objects and stuff, which is like not good for performance and all of that. But because I can just use like returns, a return type and stuff, I can use this value and I can type like this thing as just whatever this thing returns, right? It's just like what the inference in TypeScript does. It just like passes what you had before, so you don't have to name it. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to name this thing. It's like it's whatever the provider returns. And kind of like here, the same way is like whatever this hook returns, this is what it returns. I don't have like a better name for it. In a sense, it could be like something like uh, getter of like things and sender of messages, right, and so on. So like traits in uh,
Honestly, those are not terrible names. Those are pretty good names.
but I would have to come up with those names, right? I would have to name all of those things. I would have to come up with some kind of uh, I think the way that I want to explain it is, you remember that joke that Theo had about like your GraphQL like should be here, not here. Like, do you remember what he was talking about? Something like you have,
Yeah, you're saying GraphQL should be between your server and your client, not in front of your database,
right, and
right?
something
Yeah, it was database GraphQL server or backend,
something
and
like
then it
that,
was
right?
like ERPC or whatever. Yeah, and between server and client, like it should be. Uh, Let me just try to find the.
Sure. I'm not sure how you can send it to me though.
I mean, I can send it on Google Meet chat, and you can
Oh, okay. We can try
not
that.
pull it up.
But uh, the
Anyways, like I'll probably have trouble finding it.
yeah. I don't think it's kind of like that important details,
Yeah,
but
it was pretty similar to that. Yeah.
yeah.
Like he
So
said,
the
the
idea
first
is
one
that
should be, yeah, for
GraphQL.
GraphQL
I'm
should be
sorry.
between server and client and not between database and server. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So GraphQL, in your terms, that would be like stable contract, right?
GraphQL, REST, whatever gRPC, whatever you're using, you can create a stable contract out of it.
Right. And what I think the way that I reason about it is that in TypeScript, you have like a function A, and then you have a function B, and it's actually like funnier if we add like more functions, but maybe like not for this particular message. So you have a function A and function B, and between those you can have inference. I don't know what's the right what's the right way to say it. Or you have named type. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we are talking that like get user details and user details component, when they talk to each other, they can talk through some kind of like contract, or they can just like consume whatever goes in. And when we are talking about like more than one function, it's it becomes sillier, because it becomes kind of like then you have inference here, and then you have name type here, right? So that's one of the points that Theo brought up, is like if you have some kind of name, and if you have like 10 functions that chaining into each other, or like passing props and stuff, right? You have to name each of those levels. If you have a user details type, you have to say user details, user details, user details, and so on. You have to name it on the every level.
Yeah. So if you are going to name at each step, sure, you'll have to do that. But I don't think maybe Primagen made the point that you should name at every name. You should name the return types, or you should have explicit return types for every function. I'm personally not advocating that you should have explicit return types for every function or in every place. My
So
specific argument was for decoupling, for creating that contract.
uh-huh.
And you shouldn't have, most of the times you don't need to do that. Like there are some very specific situations where you would want that kind of decoupling, which means there are very specific situations. So yeah, like your third example, function A and B, there's a name type between them, but there isn't one between B and C, because the requirements between A and B are different compared to the requirements between B and C. For example, maybe the same person is working on both function B and C. Maybe they're both React hooks, and maybe function A is like a state machine or a reducer that lives outside of React, and that's a whole different person is working on that. It has a different job. It's
Right.
a different level of complexity. So you want to decouple them.
Right.
So those are the specific situations. When you have separation like that, it will be easier to come up with names. If you try to come up with names at every step, you won't be able to do that.
Yeah. And so that's why it reminded me of like this discussion of like, yeah, just come up with a layer that makes sense, and like name your things there. If you have a separate packages in monorepo, yeah, just name things between, like on the border between those packages. If and I think like why Theo likes I don't know, he has like a database, he has Prisma, he has I forgot, like TRPC, and he has uh, like React components, right?
Yep.
Uh, he can do more or less like a this code as like user, and this user gets a get get user. I don't remember how it's called in TRPC, but like get
It's like trpc dot something like it'll be a router's name, you can just do trpc.getUser.useQuery. So after get user, there is a dot use query, which it's not a function call. Get user is not a function call. So it's just
Okay.
get user dot use query. Yeah. And instead of the return value will be in curly braces, so it'll be data, status,
Yeah, it's
error,
probably like
whatever.
some kind of promise or something.
Yeah,
but
but
we will.
oh, and there's no wait.
Yeah, we will like imagine some kind of like next 15 syntax for it. But just to make my kind of like point shorter, I guess. It's like your idea is that maybe like it's not get user, but it's in a sense it's like uh really like PHP level is like select uh I mean, okay, let's call it. Let's come up with like API right on the spot. It's like select from user where ID equals right, something like that. So
yeah, that's where SQL is supposed to be.
Yeah, so like imagine gRPC and Prisma come up with like a new version that allows you to just write SQL and they generate the exact type of the user that like this SQL will return. Is that kind of like on the brink of imaginable?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're just talking about Firebase.
I actually never worked with Firebase, but
okay,
I believe you.
Yeah, most like backend as a service providers like Firebase basically are the same thing. You query your database directly from your front end.
Yes. And like, so here, if my user has a name, it's going to work. But if my table has like a full name instead, it will show me like, hey, this is how you need to fix it. And like in case like that, like where are you going to draw that like API level? Where are you going to draw that name type, right? Or where are you going to call like a contract? Like which part of that is like a contract? This is a cool looking API exactly because it doesn't introduce any middle layers, any so it's like this is really coupled, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And Theo is saying like, hey, I want to write all of my apps like that. Like imagine a world where I can do this and this code doesn't have any TypeScript, right? So it's like I never declared like anything. I didn't do like a user column like user info. I didn't do like as user info and so on, right? It's just like I want everything to be inferred. I want everything to be like how do you say it? Going like straight from the like the thing to the thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and which is why I said that if this is what your application looks like, if this is the kind of applications you're developing, then yeah, go ahead. You go all in on inference. You don't need to think about decoupling. You don't need to think about explicit types. You can just do this. The problem is not all applications are like this. Like for example, one pretty good example that I've seen recently is ZenStack, which is like kind of a new technology. They're basically like Firebase or any other backend as service providers. Like they let you query your database directly from the front end, and they did a really cool thing where they put it on their home landing page that most applications are just a UI talking to a database,
Right.
which I found hilarious because that's absolutely not true. Most applications have some sort of business logics that sits in between them. If most applications were UI talking to a database, you could just sell database UI clients and yeah, you can just sell database UI clients and never have to like develop anything.
Yeah,
So,
which like people try to do that, right? I forgot how the name of the thing is, a retool or something like that. That just
Yeah,
like a
retool is pretty cool though.
yeah, it's
Do
a
you have
UI
YouTube
on
chat
top of your
open or
database.
Twitch chat?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you have YouTube chat open? Oh, Theo is in YouTube chat.
Theo is in YouTube. Okay.
Yeah,
I hope
I'm
he's
going to.
saying nice things, right? That's what he does all the time, right? Yeah, it's oh yeah, it works.
Yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, so I was saying that if you are as, oh, by the way, yeah, Mark worked at Retool. Retool is Retool is different because Retool basically um, embraces that it's not just a UI talking to a database. You need custom logic in there.
Mm-hmm.
You need custom queries. You need business logic. You need calculations, whatever. You need some sort of like orchestration between different things. Like when you hit a button, a lot of different things happen. It's not that you hit one button and it updates one row in the database. It does a lot more things behind the scenes. And
Yeah.
as soon as you go from this sort of like simple application where like you pull something from database, show it on the screen, as soon as you go even like one or two steps beyond,
Yeah, so
you will start seeing the
this is
cracks.
where I'm going into this, right? So it's like,
Right.
and now I have a user with address, and now this user has like dot address, and it's like, yes. So here, it's like dot address. So like here, TypeScript helps us, but now when I'm writing address function, I need to have the type, right? And I need to name it. There's no way of like not naming it.
Oops. This is for input types. We like there's no inference there anyways.
So my argument is it's more about like when do you need to name things? So for me, explicit types like return types are all about creating like API level and like naming things. And
So the answer to when you need to name things is it's going to be the same as like when you need to decouple things. Like you're going to need to name things when you want to decouple, right?
uh-huh.
If you don't need to because if you don't need to like have that sort of decoupling, if you can just rely on inference and be fine with it, then you don't need to name things. So and then the question becomes, when do you want to decouple stuff? And the answer to that is, first of all, like just try to not do that. But if you need to, the way to find that out is like if you can basically if you can give two pieces of work, like two different sides of work to do to two different people, they can all like get started with it, finish it, and then at the end like integrate it together.
Right. So this is where I kind of like disagree with you because I
Okay.
don't think this has like this example that I did. I don't think it has anything to do with decoupling or splitting work between. Like I agree in
Oh yeah.
general with like the point that you made in your video about like when you're like talking about like between teams kind of, but here I'm working on it by myself. I just need a user with address, and here I already need to name things, right?
Yeah, but this is for input types. I think we were talking specifically about
Uh,
return types, right?
it's in my mind, it's kind of like the same thing. In
Okay.
my mind, this is a simple example that requires you to name things and to kind of like figure out API, even though there is no decoupling. And it's it because in Prime's case, he's like, yeah, if I need a function that is formatting address, this function takes address and returns like, okay, does it return string or does it return React node? It's like this is the first question that he asks before he even starts like implementing the thing, right? He's thinking in types the same way that um, like Java developer thinks in like object hierarchies, unless they know how every object is a child of like some other thing, right? They can't start coding. They need to figure out what is a factory that creates like a service manager that is like so on, so on, and so on, right? So this is like his thing. He will create this type first. He needs to name everything that is like happening here before he can use like format address on the address.
I I don't think he said like he needs to do it. I think his whole point was that it's useful for a new person who jumps into the project. Like it's useful for them because they can just look at that one line, which is line 186, and they can look at that one line and figure out exactly what the function is doing. It's formatting an address, which takes in like the address object shape, and it returns a React node. Now, obviously, like if you can delete that and you can just hover over formatting address and figure out that it returns a React node. So that's
Yeah, but
where I
is it
disagree
is
with
it
him.
really like is it really a good thing? You know that like this React node, it has like a null, undefined, all of those kind of like crappy things that you like didn't even like wanted to add, but now you have added it, and it's like why?
Yeah, that's why I said that's where I disagree with Prime, where like if your inference can tell you the same information, you don't need that return type there, because you
Mhm,
can hover over formatting address and get the same result.
mhm,
So I agree with Prime that it's useful to have that information as someone new jumping into a code base. I disagree with him that explicitly returning types is the only way to do it, because
mhm,
it's a good way to do it because you're naming something that otherwise might be a potentially ugly object. But you can also do that in the return statement. You can do the satisfies. Actually, I'm not sure if satisfies changes the name, but basically there are other ways to do that that would usually be easier than uh, putting the return type there. So
right.
yeah. But as
Okay,
for
so
naming, yeah, I'm not sure what your point is with like
uh-huh.
the naming here.
Okay, so I will try to kind of like restate my point. I think returning a type here doesn't win you much. So the idea of like you should always like add return times seems silly. It's like it's not going to help you in TypeScript. So like in
Agreed.
an
Yeah.
ideal world where you have like a double function and it takes I and returns a number, and your function is like multiplying I by 2, and your programming language says yeah it means I is a number. TypeScript doesn't do that. It's the opposite way. You need to add a number here and then it returns a number, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if are there programming languages that do that other
uh
than Haskell maybe.
I like Flow does it, right? Flow
Okay,
is kind of like
interesting.
Facebook's like TypeScript.
Yeah, I know
Kind of.
what Flow is.
Uh-huh.
I just never bothered to use it.
Right. Basically, the argument is that this is this is inference. Your language inferred that this I has a type of number, but this is deduction because it's like it had all the information and it deduced that this type is a number as well. It's just like silly that TypeScript uses like the wrong terms for all of this stuff. But
Got it. Okay.
yeah, I'm not going into that. So this is like this is where Prime is like not right. I think like adding a return type for this function is similar to like test driven development. I kind of like created a structure of how everything kind of like fits together, how everything like returns the right type. It's how like Haskell programmers work. They will create like all the types the right way, and then implementation is kind of like false false from it. And unfortunately, TypeScript is like not as good of a like type language as Haskell, so you can't really like rely on that. But my point is that when you're doing something like this, you have to name thing. You have to name like address. You can't. I mean, like with current tools, in 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 some kind of like um, in some kind of like pretend world, you can imagine that instead of address, you're giving like user ID, and you're just like getting address by user ID here, and it's just somehow like your compiler framework or whatnot is like so advanced that it figured all of this out and compiled all of those like 10 requests into one, so you don't have like waterfalls and all that stuff. But that's not where we live right now. You would still
See,
have to.
I don't think
Mhm.
I don't think you have to name the address type here necessarily, because so what's happening here is that the whatever you're using for like fetching the data, like in this case trpc.q.useQuery,
Uh-huh.
that is doing the job of naming something, right? So like the const user, that user has a type, and it's probably it's either like code generated or something. Like that type is stored in the library code somewhere, which means you should be able to extract that type. And let's say that you extract the user type to be user data, just hypothetical, and then you can replace address here to be user data dot or user data square
Yes.
brackets address.
Yes. You are very, very right. And uh, the way to do this is here. You're saying this is a user that has an address.
Yeah, and the user type would come from some sort of a library, whatever
Yes.
library you're using to fetch your data.
Yes. So have you like coupled or decoupled user and address here?
Yes, you have coupled to the library that you're using for your types. But again, like
Now,
that
the
you
question is,
couple to
uh,
it.
huh?
You go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. The question is like, have I decoupled like those two functions?
These two functions are not necessarily not coupled to each other. They're both coupled to the contract, and in this case the contract comes from the library. You didn't create a type definition on your own. You are just using type definitions that are being exported from a different library, so you're coupled to that. If if that type definitions change, which means if you change your database schema, that's when you have to change these functions.
Right.
You will
And
not have to change these functions. I guess you are kind of still coupled to the address component,
so
because
my argument would be this address is coming from database. So we are calling database at our kind of like lowest level possible, and we infer everything from it. So
yeah.
the technical detail of like Prisma and TRPC turned our database in like generated TypeScript files. This is like just the technical detail, but in my mind is like where we created like a named thing was at database level. We said, hey, this is a database, and this database has a user that has an address, and we just like infer everything from it. So this is where we named our things. This is what our like protocol is, and so on.
Hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. So uh, so this is like uh, so in terms of like coupling and decoupling and stuff, and like can a person work on like address component independently on a person of working on like a user with address component? It's like, yeah, not really. It's like everything is coupled to the database. Whatever the shape we're getting from database, that's where uh, we have like named things.
Yeah, but they can work independently if neither of them change the database. If they're only working on the UI part,
Hmm.
they're not changing what the database schema looks like. Sure, they can work independently for as long as possible. They are they are decoupled in the practical sense. Like you can obviously not have decoupling, any sort of like absolute decoupling in the real world. That just doesn't happen, because then things don't talk to each other and nothing ever works. But they are decoupled for all practical purposes because they're working on the UI and not the database. The database schema stays the same throughout. It never changes while you're working on this. If someone else goes and changes the database schema, that's when you have to like that's when it impacts you. Or
Hmm.
and even then it impacts both of you. It still doesn't impact, like you don't impact each other. Like if you're working on the user component, I'm working on the address component, like we can never impact each other's work. Like you can never do something that will affect how I'm writing my UI, and I cannot do something that affects how you write your UI. Does that make sense?
Yes, but imagine we're doing kind of like microservices, right? And we are writing our like part of our dashboard is written in like three-letter framework, and it's done by international teams because we know that international teams like three-letter frameworks, and they're like, no, 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 we don't care that like database stuff. We don't care about um, any of that like code generation stuff. We are just going to have a type that's called address in our like types.ts, and it's going to be the following, and our address component is going to be the following. We hope that there is a process that will check that our address and user dot address kind of like um uh I forgot the word, but like overlap enough for everything to work. So we are basically like, imagine this is like a UI three-letter framework, uh, like npm package.
Sure, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm so I have so many typos. So this is where we're like, hey, this is an npm package, and this npm package like exports like TDS file, right? And if now this address component, I'm importing it from that package, now at like in user with address component, I will have like a red squiggly of like, no, you're sending the wrong type that doesn't overlap with this type enough. And you can imagine that this type is like uh, in npm package called our our company. No, no.
Some package, whatever, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, this is our contract. We have a package that just specifies the language, that specifies the API that things can talk to each other, and everything else is coupled to like this thing, and then everything else in our application could be decoupled from each other, but they're all coupled on like this npm package. This is where I call like, we decoupled stuff and we created the contract and all that stuff. Before that, I don't think it's kind of like decoupled enough.
Okay, wait, so let me try to understand this.
Uh-huh.
This type address
Uh-huh.
lives in a lives in it's a type that you have defined
Yeah.
for your application. And then this address function at the bottom comes from a different npm package.
Uh-huh. And this is like all of that stuff before, like above it. It's like this is where basically like Theo lives. He's like, oh, I have my TRPC, I have my like user component, but then at one point I still need to call like this some kind of like I need to call somewhere that is like living separately, right? Where all of my inference ends, where they don't want to use my cool TRPC stuff. They want to declare everything, name everything, and say, hey, we don't care about your TRPC. If your address doesn't have like a street but has like ST or something like that, you rename that like on your own time. You don't send like user address, you send like user address but like st equals user address.
Right. Okay. So like if it could be a third party UI library, it could be a third party like parsing, geolocate, anything like that that has its own input.
Like in your example, that's like a different company, right? Or like a different department. So like our like lead engineer just like Primagen basically like wrote all of this stuff. Theo is writing this stuff, and you're writing this stuff. It's like you don't want to talk to each other, and Primagen likes to think in types, so he created types for everything that will ever be needed. And you're like, oh, cool. I'm no longer coupled to like all of this gRPC stuff that I don't want to deal with. I will just know that we have like a component that shows an address, right? And I only need to know about like this named thing called address.
Yeah, but I'm also calling the formatting address
Oh yeah,
function.
I'm formatting address. I guess it should be like in this function
Okay.
because it has an address, not user address, right?
Okay. So the address types comes from the npm package or company/types.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the issue here? Like, how does it fit together?
Can you ask that
Are you
again?
asking? So what's the issue here? Are you asking like who's coupled to who, or like what is your question here?
Oh, question. Okay, so I think when we are talking about like decoupling, when we are talking about like, hey, this is like a completely separate thing that is like this is our micro-frontend architecture, this is our microservices architecture, and so on. The way that I imagine it should work is kind of like that, and it it's a bit silly to do this level of complexity in your in like where everything is controlled by you. It's like here is here is the, like the process of like updating these types. Here is the process how we like run like deploy updates for this type and so on. So it's like it's all of this stuff. It sounds like so Java and so like kind of like so outside of everything that people want to use. So probably like no one wants to really use that. You want this package to be like generated from your database. You want uh does that make sense? I don't know. Like I'm a bit I'm a bit
No,
lost
I fully
myself
agree
with
with you,
where
and
I'm huh?
I fully agree with you, and that's what I mentioned in my video as well. That if it's a code base that you or a small team is working on for the whole code base, or like most of the code base, then you don't need to decouple things. Like decoupling is not something you should want to do.
Yeah,
It's something that you have to do in
right.
certain situations. And if you're the one who controls all of the code base, or if it's like you and five other people who are working on like who are developing a whole application on your own, yeah, you don't need to do that. You'll need to do that, but you will need to do that once you have like 50 or 100 engineers working on a large project.
And hopefully you still don't do that. Hopefully you still can like infer all the types from database and it's still in one big monorepo where if you did a change that is like not compatible, like your PR basically like fails automatically.
Yeah,
That's
you
the
should
thing.
be able. Yeah, you should be able to own like everything from the front to back for at least your part, where you can take advantage of that inference. It becomes a problem when things talk to each other. When you're working on something and I'm working on something, and they need to connect somehow. If they don't need to connect, that's fine. We don't need to like we we can have inference on our own stuff. But if what I'm working on needs to somehow connect to what you're working on, that's when we need some sort of a contract between us.
Yeah,
If not,
what
then what I can do is what I'm doing can potentially break what you're doing.
why can't this contract be on a database level? What's so hard with like this instead of like creating like this, right? So what's
Because there are because a lot of times there are a lot of things between the UI and the database. And that's why I brought up the earlier point, which is that most applications are not just UI talking to a database. Most applications do a lot of things in between before anything from your UI makes to the database. There is a lot of stuff that happens there. So a lot of concepts, a lot of objects, a lot of data structures just live and die in memory in between before they ever make it to the database. A lot of those things exist. For example, the example that I brought up on the Twitter space was of a calculator thing. It was for the project I was working on last year. Um, it was kind of a complex calculation of a bunch of different things. It had some legal process involved, and we were basically handed a giant an Excel worksheet where like someone had did a bunch of calculations in Excel, and now we had to translate that into our application. All of that calculation, like it took in some data from forms, it took in some data from database, and then it the output was a bunch of calculations. Most of those calculations are not stored in the database. They were there on the screen to show the user like, something that they were trying to do. I wish I could go into more details, but all of that worked in memory. There was nothing to go in the database.
okay?
There
So
were new
I think
concepts, new data structures
uh-huh.
only in the front end.
Yeah, I use database term loosely because, like, for our product, for example, we don't talk to database from JavaScript. For our product, that would be like Elixir, Elixir, like API. So that's where kind of like our kind of like source of truth comes in, and then it kind of like is inferred or like referenced I guess, um, throughout the whole app. And my thing is that you have this kind of like the source, right, of where everything happens from, and then you use that thing for the rest of your app, like this. It doesn't have to be user from database. It could be user from REST API. It could be like Stripe user, or who cares. It's just a thing that you just like reference all the time. Or you could this is like the thing about like this address is that maybe like this address has like city and zip code and whatnot, but like no, I don't care about this. I only use like those few fields. So this is the contract that we have between our like decoupled parts of the app, and I only kind of like care about that stuff. And there is some kind of like input that kind of like connects those things together. But my app is completely kind of like decoupled. It's like its own npm package. Like in olden times we would call it like smart and dumb components, of like, yeah, my component is just dumb. This is what it can do, and you figure out what you can how are you going to integrate it into. And um, and this approach is more of like, I have a I have a thing, and that thing goes through all of my app. If I'm lucky, and if I can just like run my request right in the leaf, so I don't have to like name anything. So maybe I'll have like just a user ID here, which is a string, right? That's good. I just get it get it as low as possible, and I don't introduce any names, I don't introduce any levels, I don't separate my address from user with address, because it's silly. Why would I do that? And I think I wanted to kind of like to illustrate that with like our app is like, sometimes you wanna do that, because it's like event message is used like all over the protocol. It's like there are like multiple things that could create messages, and I don't want this thing to be like ID, like author, uh, which is like ID, and so on, right? I don't want all of this complexity when I like hover over my type. I don't want to see like any of that stuff. I want it to be an event message. Like if if there was some kind of like way of like DB event message, right? that would be cool. Uh, but like for this thing, this schema is in a sense what have what if we had like a tool to turn like Elixir API into generated TypeScript, we would hope that it could like return this. We're basically like doing it by hand, but this is our kind of like Prisma, right? This is our level of API, and this is where like I would name things. This is where I would like introduce. Uh, I would introduce names. I would introduce APIs. I expect all of those APIs that have event message right now to behave like that. If like half of those APIs return event message, and half of those APIs return like event message without ID or something like that, that's kind of like a problem that needs to be solved on like API or like database on whatnot like level, not on like kind of like TypeScript level.
Yeah, so your contract exists at a network boundary.
Hmm.
It's not inside an application, it's between two different applications over a network.
Hmm.
So it's just a type of contract. Like, so I'm just talking about, in my video, I said that you can decouple two pieces of functionality by creating a contract between them. That's a very, very generic statement. You
Uh-huh.
can take that and apply to two different companies like Stripe and your company, and the contract is their REST API. You
Hmm.
can apply it to your front end and your back end. One is in TypeScript, one is in Elixir, and the contract is whatever your WebSocket API is.
Yeah,
Or you can apply that to two different functions within the same program, and
that's
the
where
contract is a
I'm
type
losing you.
definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just different types of contract. It's a very general, very high level statement of how you decouple things. What form that takes in your application, that's up to you. Whether you only do if you can only do it on the network side like you're doing it here, that's fine. If you don't need to do it within one application, that's good. You shouldn't need to do that, because if you need to do that, that means your application is getting complicated. But you might need to do that at some point if you feel like you have run into a point where you need that vertical separation, where inside the same application you somehow need multiple different sub applications or micro front ends of some sort.
And like, why would you, in a good mind, recommend that? Like, why would you go to a person and say, "Hey guys, you should use micro-frontends. You should like introduce like API boundaries between like everything that you own." Like, how is that a good advice?
I don't, which is
Right.
why I said like it's not something I would recommend someone. It's just something that I'm talking about,
That
so
happens.
that you are aware of it, so that you know the trade-offs of it,
Yeah.
which is what I said initially. Like, I look at everything as a trade-off. Micro front ends, sure, it's not something you should want to do, but there's a trade-off. There are some benefits that microservices or micro frontends bring, and it's if I don't communicate them to you, or if I don't know what those trade-offs are, I might I might run into a situation at some point where I need micro frontends, but I will not know about it
Right.
because I don't know what micro frontends are. I don't know what the trade-offs are. I don't know how to implement microservices or
Yeah.
micro frontends.
And here we are like of a different opinion of like, I don't think you should ever do that.
So yeah, so my mindset on this is an educational mindset. Is that I'm trying to tell you that hey, micro frontends are a thing, microservices are a thing. Here's why you would use them, and here is why you would not use them. And
Mhm.
now it's up to you to make the choice of to make the decision whether you should do it or not. It's it's a little opposite of Theo in that sense, because Theo tries to like Theo has opinions, and he like made the T3 stack, and he's like, okay, this is how you should do it. But then Theo also goes around and like documents everything on why these specific technologies were chosen, of like everything about bleeding responsibly, which is like on one end you stick to what is known, what is stable, which is SQL, and on the other end you can go crazy and you can go with like edge databases or edge native whatever. So it's in that sense where I just want to make people aware of everything that exists and what the trade-offs are so that you can make the best decision on your own.
Yeah. So
I
like,
don't want to make that decision on your behalf. I don't want to tell you that you
yeah.
shouldn't make microservices, because you might be in a situation where you could benefit from microservices.
Right. And how many of your viewers in like in number, like in people, do you think will get any benefits from hearing, hey guys, use micro frontends, use microservices? My hope is like a zero, right? It's like no one that no one that cares about programming enough to kind of like watch YouTube videos about programming is like explicitly wants to do that. It's just once you're in a like a bad situation where everything is bad and it's like, yeah, we're I guess we're doing microservices.
Yeah, so exactly. That's the I guess we are doing microservices. If you are at that point, there's two choices. You either do it correctly or you don't, or you do it badly. Doing it badly means it's a very big loss. If you're at a point where you have to implement microservices, it's a very critical decision. It's not something that you can get wrong, because if you can get wrong, it's thousands or millions of dollars of loss.
Right. So
If you're building microservices,
how
or if you need to
many
build micro,
yeah,
go ahead, sorry.
how many $1 million companies are watching your videos and deciding on like if they should apply that to their projects?
For now, I probably none, but like my
Right.
goal is not like that's my goal is to like build this for the long term. Like,
Right.
sure, they're probably not watching my channels, they're watching other channels on YouTube. There are other channels on YouTube that target content specifically for that kind of software.
Yeah.
There are communities on Discord, on Patreon, that I'm a part of, that are around these content creators, around these
Yeah.
educators, that make videos for that scale.
I
Like
think
the
for
biggest example is if you look up continuous
yeah.
delivery on YouTube. I don't know if you know him. You know continuous delivery?
Uh, Probably not. I was just my point is like for every person that who actually needs that, there are like 100 or maybe 1,000 people who are using this like prematurely just because it sounds cool to like, yeah, I deployed my like 2-page blog using Kubernetes and stuff. It's just kind
Yeah.
of like
And
over engineering and all that stuff.
that's why when I made a video called How to Build Microservices, I also made a video called Please Don't Build Microservices, which is why I present both sides. Which is why I also in this video that you have behind you, I say that okay, this is how you can decouple things in TypeScript. But then I also say that most of the times you should not need to do this. Most of the times you should just use inference, and that should be able to solve your problems.
Yeah.
The only reason why you want to decouple things is when you have this very specific situation that you have different people working on it, or these functions are complicated enough that the overhead is worth it, that you want to work on them separately. That's why I put all the I put all the different uh, I don't want to say facts, but uh, different ideas or different factors that go into these decisions.
Yeah, it just, I don't want to like dwell too much on that, but I think there is a danger of over prescribing over complicated solutions. And I'm not saying you're doing this in this video, but it's just in general. I think it's
Yeah, fair.
a bit of a
So
like
I think
industry problem.
the key there is when you said over prescribing. The the point is that I'm not prescribing anything. I'm describing.
Okay.
Like I'm describing things. I'm like phenomena or like things that you can do
uh,
and why you should do them. I am at no point prescribing a solution that hey, you should do this. I'm describing it that these are the factors that go behind a certain decision. Now, if these are the if these are the criteria that you meet, you should do this. If these are the criteria that you meet, you should do this.
okay.
So it's if you have multiple different, like, you cannot prescribe 5 solutions to the same problem, right? That's not a prescription anymore. If you're prescribing different solutions to the same thing, or if you're prescribing two opposite things, like if in one video I say that you should build microservices because X, and then in the next video I say that you should not build microservices because X,
Uh-huh.
I'm not prescribing anything. I'm just using some clickbait titles to describe what the problems are or what the trade-offs are.
Okay. So we're not going to fix it right now, but it just yeah. I think it's a bit of a problem. So anyway, I just wanted
I
to.
think at least
Uh-huh.
if nothing else, I think at least we found like the core disagreement at least of like what I'm doing and what maybe you're not you don't agree with, maybe at least.
Sure. So let's go back to the idea that I wanted to show about like types. So here is like the types that we have for I don't know, like author, right? And we're we are like referring that type, uh, and it's maybe like not that complicated of a type, but you can imagine that somewhere there is uh, like author and like in square brackets like type, right, or something like that, which is like don't oh, we actually have author type here, but maybe like link type or something like that, right? So it's like don't invent a new type, don't don't name like a new thing prematurely, just like yeah, just refer to the just refer to it if you have it somewhere. Yeah, so like that, right? So it's like why would I, when I creating this function, why would I try to name this something and introduce this kind of like separate truth, right? So I could like take this, for example, and name it like a new function, but it's like who is going to check that it's the same function? Like Primagen's point is that, but now when I look at this function in isolation, I know what this function does. But the problem with TypeScript is that it can deceive you. It's not like a sound type check. I forgot, sound type system or something. It's like
Something like
it.
that. Yeah, I
Huh?
get it. Something like that. I'm not sure what he said, but yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah. So it's like it will help me to understand like this function. But now, if something that is calling this function, so like here I'm referring to like one thing, but when I call it and like type here is different, TypeScript could say, it overlaps like enough. We don't, we are not going to complain about it. And I tweeted it like too many months ago to remember, but I had like one of those bugs of like just like passing and or like forgetting to pass something or something like that. And it's like TypeScript is like, oh, it's fine. It's like who cares? I had a type I think it was for counterpart or something. Counterpart. Yeah, who knows what that is? No, not best room. Like one of those things. And basically, this value, it could be undefined, but there were like two types. Basically, like say like type. Um, I'm typing so bad today. So there's like a type that is like that, and there is like a type B, which is like which takes A and adds Y, but this Y is like sometimes it's undefined. And what happened is that uh, there was like a value that was of type B, but it didn't have Y. So it's like it should be an error because like, hey, this type only has X, it should have Y. But because it could be undefined, TypeScript like, it's close enough, like who cares? But it actually like kind of like broke all the logic that like uh, that I was like expecting. I was expecting this function to take type B, but instead it like took type A gladly and didn't complain. So that was kind of like that was the problem that I had with TypeScript. It's like TypeScript is not designed to solve all those kind of like smaller kind of like issues. It's a more blunt tool, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
the way to fix it is to infer everything as like as much as possible, unless you want to name it.
Yeah, I mean it's inferring everything is the way to fix it technically. But the other thing that you might have to ask, like I mentioned on Twitter, is that how often do you run into that issue? Or like how often would someone else run into that issue?
Right.
Like let's say that go ahead.
Yeah, and I said something like you have to be like a TypeScript wizard to understand those things, and I think you will run up with. I think nowadays it's a bit more rare because TypeScript tooling kind of like improved. We are not running with like nullable types. We are now using like all the strict flags usually and so on. So it's like it's less issues like that. So like me and Theo were probably like burned by some like older version of TypeScript where it was like even worse. But that got us to the place where we're like, no, don't trust TypeScript for like these things. And like in my mind, until like I tested it recently, is like one of the things that you're like not trusting TypeScript is like you want to say that it's like I have like thing that I'm getting from like document query selector something like that, right? And in the olden days, if you do something like that, it will eat out your nullable type. So like this thing returns HTML element or null, and if you do it like that, it's like okay, I guess we're typecasting, right? So it's like close enough.
Yeah. And then strict mode fix that.
Right. But like in this case, I wonder if it shows this error or not. Yes, it actually shows, but before it wouldn't. So I think that's why it's like Theo is a bit wrong and like I'm a bit wrong. And this was like a teaching experience for me. It's like TypeScript is not as bad as we remember it. So before you could do this, you could say like, "Hey, we're getting this thing, and it's probably development. Who cares?" But now you have to do like this, right? So now it's. Is it still complaining? Interesting. Wow. I guess it became even stricter. Is that how we do it now? Wow.
Yeah, you casted it to be a div element instead of an HTML element.
Right. And That's kind of like the thing. Like in my mind, if I do as, it just like ignores everything that it was like having before, and it's no longer the truth. And so that's why like I don't like this, and that's why I don't like this, right? So it's like this, like all of those things. All of those things used to be the same. So it's like you are typecasting whatever you have here as this type, and it will kind of like not check. You're typecasting as this type like this, and it won't type check. And you're typecasting to this, it will not type check. It's not true anymore, but in my mind, I don't trust that. So that's why I don't like as. That's why I don't like declaring types. That's why I don't like return types. But it's like I'm wrong. It's not as bad anymore. It's still bad. You still shouldn't use as. You still probably shouldn't use like this. But now it's in a different
The
way.
thing behind as is an any type. If it's coming from a fetch call, you have to use as, right?
Right. So now it's wrong in this way. Now it's wrong. Now it like it feels that it is wrong as I remember it, but it's actually okay. You have to use this. So now it's wrong in this way. It's like I can override types, and like just for the sake of it, I will just write like this. Right? So I can write any type when I do, like I can extend it, right? So it's like uh, before it could like just transform any type to any type, but now I can transform it into like a bigger type that is like is still wrong, and you still when you're like thinking about like Primagen is like, no, I created this function and I expect it to return this, and it has like 300 lines, so like I'm not sure if it returns this. This is like the shortest way to get to the situation where you no longer know if it returns this thing, right? So like maybe like 3 years, I can't click it for some reason. Maybe like 3 years ago, this function returns string or element, and now it returns just element or just string. So you are lying. That's kind of like the point of like type overriding is like you're introducing a lie, and there is no way to kind of like check it, right? So like how
Wait,
would you
can you show me that again? What exactly is the lie here? I'm not sure I caught that.
Okay, so my first point is like as typecasting like this or typecasting like this are the same things. So it's like all of them have this exact same issue. So it's like they're no different between each other. Like if you are writing a return type, this is the same as writing as. Are we kind of like okay on that point?
I'm not sure about that. Like if you return something else from
Okay, so I have
I don't think I've go
I
ahead.
have a function that returns like math random, right? So the type of this function, okay, it's function. Type of this function is like a thing that returns a number. Are we okay here?
Sure. Yeah.
Can I write as number or like object?
Okay, and that seems to work. Okay.
Right. Like the funny
Okay.
thing,
Got it. Yeah. Okay, now I see what you mean.
and like this as or this return type are the same. It's like for
Got it. Yeah.
all
Sure.
purposes. So
Sure.
I
Yeah.
don't like return types for the same reason I don't like as.
I mean, yeah, you don't like something for because it can be used in the wrong way. Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
So you just want to you just want to avoid things that can potentially be used as or used as the wrong way, or
Yes.
potentially can lie to you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's fine. The
And
Primagen point was just that this is a tool that I can use to help me, and I will do that. You are saying that this is a tool that can hurt me, so I won't use that. That's it's simple as that. Like
yeah.
you can say that it's string or HTML element, but the thing is you don't have a good reason of doing that. Like in a real code base, you won't do that.
Yes, in a
If
real
you're
code
doing
base,
if you
you
are doing that
will.
in a real code base, there is a good reason behind it.
Yeah, yeah. In a
And
real
by
code
doing that, you
base,
are revealing that reason.
you will for sure have that. That's exactly the point. That's exactly why I say like you have to like be hurt by that to get into like where
Precisely.
Theo
Yeah.
or I am.
Yeah. And like in my last 3 years of working with TypeScript, I don't think I've ran into that issue. So
Yeah,
which is why I said that you really have to be a TypeScript wizard. Like
yeah,
you have to be doing weird things with it to run into issues like
yeah.
these.
And I can show
But if you're
you.
working on,
Uh-huh.
if you're hopefully like if you're working on real code bases with like new people, if you're not doing a lot of weird stuff, if you're trying to keep everything simple, you probably won't run into issues like that. And if you're explicitly typing your returns, you're trying to convey some information to someone.
Sure.
You're not just using it as like, okay, I'll
Right.
just put string and HTML element in here,
And
and inside I'll return.
I would rather see like a comment that is like returns number or object. I would
Yeah, it's
rather
the same
see
thing.
that because I expect comments to be wrong. I don't like this. It's like it hurts that this could be wrong. And there is an very easy example why it could be wrong because you had like a flag, and sometimes you return math random, sometimes you return like empty string, and like not empty object, right? So like and like 10 years ago that made exact sense, and it's like this function was returning this or that, but then we removed that flag and we left just this one, and like in a one line function you can clearly see that it's wrong. In a like 300 line function you will forget that it's wrong, and this is what like hurt us.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and that's something that you'll probably have to bring up with Primagen, that you're writing a function that somehow returns a number or an object. Why is it doing that? Uh, so
Yeah,
there's a difference in
so that's
perspective.
why I did like this example of like
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah,
So that's the difference in perspective, right? You look at the return type, and you're seeing a type that is potentially wrong,
yeah,
like it's lying to you, and
yes,
it's actually returning something else, right?
yeah. When I
When
see this
what
I see
the
like
point that
as.
Primagen Yeah, and the point that Primagen is making is that when a new person sees that, they will look at that and they will know that, okay, this is a function that needs to return a number or an object.
Right.
So now they will go into the implementation of the function with that knowledge in mind.
Yeah.
So now they have a better idea of what this function is doing.
uh
Or when they use that function, when they call it in their own code, they have a better idea of what the function will return,
uh
so that they can make better choices around it.
yeah.
It's just like it's a perspective difference. Like I said, you're TypeScript wizards. You've run into this before. You probably don't have like that new person getting into a new code base perspective, and he probably works on projects where he gets a lot of new people. I worked on projects where like I constantly every 6 months I have to train like new people who are getting onboarded onto into that projects. So I tend to be in that mindset quite a
hmm
bit.
And I think that I don't agree with that, and I think like just writing your Java like TypeScript as JavaScript without declaring any types, where everything is just inferred, is it's better for newcomers. And I think like writing a comment is solving that like thing of like what does this function do, is it does this, like can I check it that it does this, oh no it doesn't, so I know that now that this comment is wrong, so it's like I think
Right, but
it's an
comments
easier
don't have a
workflow,
syntax.
huh?
Comments don't have a syntax though. Like you can write
Sure.
you can write 5 comments in 5 different ways,
Yes.
and they can all like be interpreted in 5 different ways.
Uh-huh.
Whereas a return type has a very specific syntax. You know exactly what that is. You don't
Yeah, it's
have to
just
do
like
extra
it's a
parsing.
bad syntax. That's the problem. It's like
Yeah,
if it was it was if it was I think that it was like um what is like return type of X, like I forgot, but there's like a project that can run TypeScript tests, and if I could just write like right is or something like that, if this was a thing that I could write for my function, that is like, please type check me.
Which you can just hover on X and it'll tell you the same thing, right?
No, it's a different thing. So there is a project, like I don't write unit tests, so I don't remember how it's called, but you can write things like that, and the difference between that is that it will go and check what is the inferred type is, and then it will check if this type is the what you expected, and it will like error out for you. But it's like a separate tool from TypeScript, because TypeScript doesn't do that.
Yeah, so you just have to make the best of you have to make the best of a flawed tool
Uh-huh.
for your specific situation.
Right, but like using TypeScript and thinking that it does that is wrong, and that's why it's like so upsetting for like me and Theo. It's like, no, Primagen,
Yeah,
you don't
that
know
makes
like
sense.
how
Yeah,
TypeScript works. That's why you're using it wrong. It's not Haskell, it's not Rust, it's
yeah,
not like those things. Uh-huh.
yeah. But it's also that the issues that you're talking about, he's just not faced those issues, or he's
Right,
pretty
and
sure
that's
that
why it's
in those
upsetting that
projects those issues are
he's
just not going to come up.
yeah, that's why it's upsetting that he is
Yeah,
like spreading his message as if he like has enough authority to like to teach someone this is what you should use, right? Because like, yeah, I don't know any of the problems of like using TypeScript this way, but I still will recommend you doing that. And I
I
think
mean,
this is
then you would have to I don't that he can then say the same thing for you then.
uh-huh.
Like he can say the same thing, that you probably don't have the authority of knowing what all the other projects out there are doing. Like
Sure.
if do you think that there's a TypeScript wizard in every TypeScript project out there?
Right. So
Probably not.
this is the difference between like me not knowing his specific environment and him not knowing TypeScript, which is like one of those is like more clear than the other.
So see, the problem here is that when you're saying that him not knowing TypeScript, it's not, again, this is not something that, once again, you're saying that every person who's using TypeScript in a project, they might run into this issue where the return type is wrong, and it will cause some bugs in the program, right? But is that really the case? Like, is every TypeScript project going to run into this issue if they use return
Probably
types?
yes. If they use the types as Primagen proposes, they will. And that's why I will like take my advice from like Matt, who is like a literal TypeScript wizard about TypeScript, than from
Yeah,
Primagen,
in that
who's
case, you need to bring on Primagen on the stream instead of me, and then talk to him about
right.
how he has been using TypeScript for I don't know how many years, and how he's not run into this issue before, and how he sees the benefit from of yeah, we're still going.
Yes, every project can have bad return types if you use return
Yeah,
types.
I get that. The point is that how bad is it? Is it bad enough to compensate for like all the disadvantages that Primagen talked about? I definitely need to watch your video, because like most of the things that you talked about on the Twitter space, I think I was kind of tuned out. I was editing my video to think of at that point, so I didn't pay too much attention.
Yeah, I
But I'm
think.
talking here like in terms of what
Uh-huh.
Primagen was talking about,
I think
because
Primagen
like
wants
yeah,
to use this. I think Primagen wants to have type check errors that are specific to like, does my function return this type? And this is not what TypeScript has as a function. And it feels like it should, it feels like it has, but it doesn't. there is like I don't remember the tool name, but there's like there is because like TypeScript code base uses that. It's not like those tests are not in TypeScript. They're like as a separate tool. As far as I remember, I like last looked into it like 5 years ago. So there are like tools that will allow you to write tests like that, and they are unfortunately are written as comments. uh, and
Yeah, I mean, you're saying that the disadvantages he talked about aren't that bad, but it's again like it's the disadvantages that he's talking about, which probably means he has seen those disadvantages or the benefits of putting return types on his projects. So we need to see more of his perspective in this situation of like, okay, maybe he needs to try out full inference and not using return types for a while, and then like report on his situation. Because maybe again the kinds of projects that he's working on or the kinds of teams that he's working on will probably be different from the kinds of projects that you're working on or Theo's working on or I'm working on.
right.
Like it's the situations are different.
And I think that his experience is probably working on more kind of like microservicey, more kind of like separate apps where like it's
Yeah.
like your package that you're writing is about like I'm getting this contract in, I'm getting this contract out, where it's like it's their problem if it's returning like a wrong type. Okay, it's like censoring Theo.
Yeah, he said the B word.
uh, yeah, I think it's like the irony here is like Primagen is like all about like learn your tools, like type faster, figure out how to like use your editor better, and so on. And it's like, do you want to learn TypeScript? No, I know enough. Like I don't care. I was like, okay. Then your message is kind of like ends here. It's like you're not going to like, you're not planning to be at like a TypeScript wizard, right? You're like, no, I'm going to be like a Vim wizard. I don't care about TypeScript.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't, like I mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily fully agree with Primagen that we should always be using return types. I all I'm saying is that I understand his perspective where having those return types is easier when you're trying to read a function. It's just that you can also hover on a function and you can get a pretty good idea of what's being returned from it. My argument was it was kind of related, but it was totally on like decoupling. And I'm still all in for reference or like for inference for most of your programming.
Right. And I'm like
I'm
trying to be
always doing
both
both
sides.
sides.
I think Theo. I think I think the idea is that Matt's video was also kind of like both sides. He says, "Hey, this is the thing that you can use. It kind of like brings you like disadvantages and these disadvantages, and this is where kind of like one worth over the other. And it's like for library code, I would like declare types, and for other stuff I wouldn't. And I'm on like Matt's side, and I when I posted that thing for Primagen, like I didn't say hey like never use return types, but it's like hey, the way that you use return types on stream, it's a bit silly. It's like not how TypeScript designed. So like my message is not on like you should use like one or the other. My message is you should use both. You should use both. You just need to know what are the dangers of it are, and this is why I liked Matt's video because it's more in that vein. And I just wanted to go through your like it took like 1.5 hours to get there. But I wanted to get to this okay, someone messaged Tim to ask what Jonathan Blom thinks. I don't know who that is, unfortunately, so I'm sorry. um so that like user get user details example that takes is that what I'm thinking about? Maybe it was a different example. It was switching on role, right? Yeah, and either returns user or admin. I wonder if I can easily like find example of us using that. There's probably like some like magical grab command jblow. Uh, it feels something familiar, but I'm really bad at names. So is that it? I'm clearly not following him. So
I also don't know who this person is.
okay, we're not going to go too much into that. But so I have a role. Um, if I'm going to find it, it's probably going to be where I wonder where we have like this in our code base. Famous game, yeah. Okay. Uh, I'm not like questioning that he's famous. I'm just saying that I
I
don't.
just don't care.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I don't care. I just like don't follow enough. Uh, okay, so okay, it has to be like as const, right? Something like that. And can be and then agent has whatever he has role or like permissions. Okay, users have permissions.
Twitch, that's how I've heard the name. Yeah.
Oh, the Dev and Twitch. Like my thing is that I don't watch Twitch as much. Like I try to watch it more since I started streaming, but uh, there is a joke of like I'm a writer, not a reader. It's like I know how to write, I don't know how to read. uh, okay, so I have kind name, and then like I want to do perms, but it's like uh, it could be undefined. But then if I say that I have a type for agent, that is, help me compile it. I'm really bad at typing today. Okay, and I want to like this be agent. Oh, I don't need this const here. And it's like, oh, now I have an error because this firms thing, it doesn't exist on the agent. So before TypeScript created like a type for the whole function that was like, sometimes you have perms, sometimes you don't. But like here, I can't get my perms anymore. And like Primagen's argument is like, yeah, you need to check. You need to check the which one is it? Like user. You need to check. You need to do a runtime check first, and it has to be like a separate value. And if you check the types, now you can have perms. Is that the overall like the example?
Yeah, I think I had the same thing in my video.
Yeah. And so this is agent, and we want to have user that is like that. And we want to do like as user here, so we don't have to do as const here anymore. And it's like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I can write type overloads so that it's uh, so that so that it does this, and it returns an agent, and it returns a user. Uh, What's the problem
Yeah,
here?
and now it's successfully complaining that it can only be an agent.
Yeah. Okay. So the interesting thing is that I didn't specify the type here, right? I uh, I could have written like here, like this, uh, and sometimes it's actually you can do something like this, and it's complaining because you can actually write a third override, which is like this, which
Yeah,
is
I almost had that in my video, but then
uh-huh,
I removed it because it was too much.
because this is the uh, I don't know if like if he did it for the same reason, but like you sometimes need to have this as well because if you have like a value, right? So it's like if you have something like that, and maybe it's like from URL parameter or something like that. So it could be both. You're like you're basically like um, you're either doing runtime check here, or you have to do something like y equals agent, then get user details. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
It's like
mean, yeah, yeah, you should have the third one as well. Yeah,
yeah.
I had that in the code that I'm showing in my video, but then I removed it last minute.
Okay, that's cool. I would have given you like more points if you didn't. But again, it's like TypeScript wizards problems, right? Um, so, and again, like you don't have to write type here. It's like if you're writing a code like this that is doing some TypeScript magic, the idea here is that you are lying to TypeScript. You're saying, hey, TypeScript, you think you know better, but like I know better. And I hate unit tests, but this is where I would have written like a unit test, and that's like the one that can check types and stuff. You don't actually like need that thing. You can write it in like in plain TypeScript. For a function like that, you can write a test that will like fail if the types are not correct. But besides the point, basically like you need to check for like never and stuff. But um, if I'm writing code like that, that code better be like a library level. Like I want this to be like src slash utils stuff. I want it to be like a like npm package or something. It's like it's where Matt says, hey, you should use you should this is where you use type overriding. This is where you use return types for library level code, and you better like be sure that it's uh, testable and all of that stuff. And the way that I would do it is I wouldn't do this. I would do like get. Uh, okay, it's all user. Let's call it like profile detail. Otherwise, my point is not going to be as good. uh, I would have taken this and I would call it like get user or like agent details. And this is like a separate function. So that uh, so that my function, like this magical function that does some of your type checking stuff, it's like as small as possible, and it's like it's really clear if something gone wrong. If I now have more roles, or if I removed one of them or something, it's really clear. Oh no, it's like it's no longer like doing this contract and stuff. Which again, like it's cool that TypeScript now can complain about this. but
Yeah,
it wasn't
I
always the
fully
case.
agree with you. And maybe I didn't make it clear enough in my video, but I basically said all of the same things that you're saying right now, just in different words. That it should, you're saying that it should be like in a different library. That's basically what I mean by decoupling, that it
Hmm.
should be decoupled to a level where they can be worked on independently. Now, it should be in a separate library. That's just one
No, no, no.
example of
So
that.
when I say library
Yeah.
level, I really mean like utils. Where is it? Where do we have CSX something? Right. I really mean no. This one is bad. I mean, Tagnam is it's kind of too simple, but I really mean like if you're doing something magical that is like maybe like a generic or like a get date or something like that. That kind of thing. It should be. I'm not saying it should be in like in a separate package. I'm saying it should be like a thing that is like reused 100 times, and if it's wrong, you know right away it's wrong. My thing is like not every code has to be written at that level. Sometimes you're creating a function just because you want like some code not to be repeated in a silly sense, it's like you're writing a map function. It's like, okay, but why didn't I specify that it returns a React node, right? It, uh, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get your point. Yeah. I think now what's happening is that I think that both of us mostly agree on stuff on the return types. It's just that you're I think at this point you're mostly disagreeing with Primagen and not with me. Like everything that you're saying, I'm in full agreement with, and most of that stuff, like I've already said in my video, just
Mhm.
in maybe with different words. At this point, like we are just talking about what Primagen was talking about, which is like return typing every function, which I already mentioned that I don't agree with.
Yeah,
So I think we are
and
in full agreement here.
and again, like not using return types at all is also wrong. So like I'm not saying that like Theo isn't isn't wrong. I'm
I
just
mean, he's
saying,
not here
huh?
anymore. You can say it.
I'm sorry.
He's not here anymore. You can say it if you
Okay,
want.
good. uh, I'm just trying to find like all the like crazy. Wow, this is like one from my like 5-year old TypeScript examples. I'm just trying to find like a good good example of like when you want to use it. Like in here, like I didn't name it. I just probably wrote it. I'm saying I'm not wrong. Yeah, I know that you're saying that you're not wrong, but can you be always right? It feels tiring. Yeah. So this is what I would call like library level code, right? So this is doing something like completely magical, and it's turning like a string into like a union thing. And this is actually like interesting because we are basically this is this is the stuff we get from basically like a server from like JSON. And we are like, okay, our code only knows how to handle GitHub, GitLab, and so on. So this is that like my example of like 3-letter framework of like, yeah, we are only handling this case. If you're sending us something like that we don't know, we're like, that's your problem. And this is sort of like stuff. Uh, and like, why am I doing it like this silly way? Yeah, because I don't want to write this type and like name it and so on. I just want to infer it from like some data that I have, right? And this is like my feeling how you should use it. You should infer as much as possible, including inferring when you're writing in return types.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm in full agreement.
Okay, so my battery is dying. Theo still thinks he's right, but we can't do anything about it, right?
I mean,
And the
we'll have to
Primagen
wait for his
thinks,
video.
huh? I'm sorry.
We'll have to wait for his video.
Yeah, and the Primagen still thinks that he's right, so we won't probably like fix it. But I just wanted to show that we modern people exist, and we have our reasons to use like one or the other.
I love this picturing of Primagen as like a boomer, and all of us like being the new guys on the block. Specifically, all of you guys.
Yeah, I don't think he's a boomer. He's just like it's like I like Linux. Unfortunately, right now I'm using Mac, but it's like I like configuring stuff. But it's like at some point you're like, okay, I like configuring like this, but maybe like not this, right? And I think for him is like it works for me. Like the way that I use TypeScript works for me. I don't want to learn how you TypeScript people use TypeScript. I want to use TypeScript as like uh, like Andrei Soroker, right? Our CEO, he is from like C# background, so he likes to write TypeScript as he's writing C#, and I just quietly go and like rewrite everything after, and yeah, you have to deal with that. But anyway, so um, this is like about like naming things and stuff. You need to like this function, like for context, it needs to have a type. So like where do I get this type? I get it from like return function. This is a really simple provider. It's like just returning boolean, but it usually returns like 20 fields in the thing. And it's like this is like my approach. I try to not name things unless I really need it. And when
Yeah,
I,
naming things is hard.
huh? Yeah,
Naming
exactly.
things is
Yes, exactly. And uh, when I name it, it's for a good reason, right? So we have we have like an npm package, right? So that npm package, it needs to have like a clear API that is like, hey, this is the thing that you can get like over I forgot like some callback, and hey, this is the thing that you call and it returns like this or that. So I can't like not name it here. It has to be. It's like, what if it returns the wrong thing? Well, then I have to fix it. There's no other way of like doing that, right? Okay, I think we're kind of like we are in agreement that we don't have too much to disagree about all of this stuff.
Yeah, I think our main focus should be Primagen right now. He's the common enemy
No. The Theo
in the
is
metaphor.
also wrong. Don't forget about
Of course, yeah. Everyone's wrong.
that. Otherwise,
Everyone's wrong.
yeah. Otherwise, what's fun in that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I have 5 more minutes.
No. We're just finishing. I don't know if you have any kind of like any finishing words. I guess like don't believe influencers. Just do your own research.
Yeah, my final words would be go. I Give me 1 second. I want to get this right. Uh, what was it called? Where is that?
I'm not following him from this account.
I'm just trying to. Yeah. Just look for a YouTube video called "Are Tech YouTubers Hurting Noobs?" That will explain everything.
Who is it from?
Hurting noobs. Hurting noobs. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Just watch that video that has everything that uh
yeah,
all the issues that you might have with tech YouTubers or influencers. That video just answers everything.
yeah. This guy maybe like knows a thing or two.
Yeah, that guy knows a thing or two.
Okay. Uh, okay. I changed my mind a bit after researching that, and I hope like everyone changes their minds a bit, except Matt. Matt is like he knows the thing, right? He's already there. Okay, so I guess that's it. And yeah, this is everyone's homework. I should probably just add it like in description. And
Oh, this
uh,
was my first live debut.
that's cool. And we try this over the like meet stuff, so that's also fun for me. Oh no, someone like chatted in 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 the thing, and I didn't see. So
There
should
are
I
people in Twitch
quickly
chat.
check it?
Nice.
Yeah, I don't have my second monitor, so like
Oh, Theo was just bouncing around.
okay. I know this guy from Twitch. Okay,
Yeah,
I guess they were
you'll have to
chatting
watch
like
the VOD
over
to
the.
find the context behind these chat messages.
Okay, they were just chatting between themselves because I was showing that on the screen. Unfortunately, like I don't see that screen because I don't have the second monitor. Um, and yeah, don't believe the day in the life videos. I forgot how she is. Her name is like Me Too or something like Meow Too. Do you know what
Mewtwo, yeah.
I'm
MEWTRU.
yeah. So she posted a video about like day in the life, and I was like, no, no, no. That's like the once you post that video, everyone's getting laid off. So like, don't do that. You can actually have chat overlay
Yeah.
on your monitor. Yeah, it's
Too much
complicated.
work.
Anyway, yeah, thank you so much for like this kind of like short notice stuff. We did it for 2 hours. I was hoping it would be a bit faster, but yeah. Uh, Thanks everyone. Chat was lively. Unfortunately, I couldn't see it.